Welcome to Shikshantar, Anuradha. Warm
Very happy
welcome.
to be here. In fact, I would like to thank Seema because she called up and she asked me for it. But then I don't know whether it was very conscious, deliberate, or just by the way that she said the session could be based on stories from Sri Aurobindo and Mother. And frankly, I hadn't thought of it that way. And it immediately clicked, and I was, the whole kind of burden of doing a session kind of dropped. And to tell stories is such a lovely thing. So thank you, Seema, for suggesting that.
I have Minoti Didi to thank for that, Anuradha Didi, because you being her teacher, she knows a lot. Yeah. So she suggested the topic and she knew that you have so many interesting stories. So thank you, Minoti Didi, for the suggestion.
Not at all, Seema. We're all in this together, in this boat. So that's how we sail through. Yes, Anuradha.
Shall I start?
Please do.
Yes.
Okay. So I will share my screen, and I have put most of the ideas on the PowerPoint. Right. So this is the theme, who's a facilitator? And I've tried to put together some anecdotes from the living examples of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. But when I was meditating on it, just one morning, thinking what should I do? For some reason, this quotation came to me, which on the surface has nothing to do with teaching and being a facilitator, but I'm going with it because it suddenly came. Some of you would be familiar. This is from the Mother, when somebody asked her about Sri Aurobindo and herself. She said this: without him, I exist not. Without me, he's unmanifest. So, what does this mean really? Would anybody like to respond? What does it mean? Without him, I exist not. Without me, he's unmanifest.
We can raise our hands and we can take your names. Sanjay Bhaiya would like to go ahead.
Yeah, Sanjay?
So, I think this is um the essential theory of the Advait, that the divine is all around and inside me, and without him I exist not, without me he is unmanifest.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else?
Sujasha Didi.
I felt that this is kind of like saying that uh, just as Sri Aurobindo's teaching made the mother what she was, maybe allowed her to evolve. At the same time, he spoke through her, what I understood from.
Yeah, yeah. So, the aspect of the existence and manifestation, which Sanjay brought out, that everything is one, and Sri Aurobindo and Mother, uh, that is how, uh, when you read further or from Sri Aurobindo and Mother, you understand that they are one. They are the same consciousness in two modes. What are these two modes? What you are saying, one is the mode of it's a static mode, a static poise, or like in philosophy, it's called the Purusha, the witness, the one who gives the Anumanta, the one who gives sanction to the action. If that is not there, that silent core within us is not there, then our action has no meaning. In fact, it has no life, it has no authenticity, it has no power. So without him, I exist not. It is just not possible for Prakriti or executive nature or divine mother to act unless there is this solid basis of silence and witness and divine sanction. And without me, he's unmanifest. When Purusha by nature is not executive, then if the divine energy, divine mother or Shakti, the executive force was not there, then we would see nothing. There would be no universe. There would be no world. Everything would just exist in a cocoon, and there would be nobody to see it in any case. So without him, I exist not. Without me, he's unmanifest. So both are equally important. So once this sentence came to me, I thought, okay, what does it mean uh, for this session? And I felt that this is the core of integral education also, where in myself, if I do not touch that core of silence within me from where action originates, then my teaching is shallow, superficial, without true power or authenticity. And yet, if I just withdraw and just stay in that withdrawn, indrawn mode, then there is again no power to manifest and actualize, especially for all of us who are in the teaching field. Perforce, we are drawn out by the children. We have to communicate. We have to, I can't say today I've come to class, but I just want to actually, I just want to meditate and do nothing. And tomorrow also do nothing because I'm going through a process. So one has to connect to that, whatever one is going through, and nurture it and remain connected to that, but at the same time create the bridge to manifest it in the most beautiful, powerful way one can. So these I would consider as two poises within ourselves as a teacher. The shlokas that we started with today, I was listening to them and I thought, well, in a way everything is said. But then the thought came to me, whenever we invoke, in India especially, whenever we invoke, we have these beautiful shlokas, whether it's Asutoma or Guru Brahma, etc., where always this movement is to go towards the light, go towards completeness, go towards immortality, something which never dies, go towards eternity, beyond. All the shlokas pointed to that. The question to ask ourselves, of course, is when we are in the classroom or when we are planning lessons, how much of this is in our consciousness? How much of this is our aim? And then when it comes to examinations, is this at all there? So, so there is this dichotomy. When we use the word guru also, we celebrate Teachers' Day. But if we were to celebrate Guru's Day, I think like Guru Purab is there, na? Guru Purab, Guru Purnima, or whatever. I don't know how it's celebrated.
Guru
But the
Pur-
connotation, yeah, sorry,
Guru
somebody's
Purnima.
Guru Purnima. So the connotation changes totally because Guru is someone who removes the darkness from your consciousness, darkness from your mind, from your emotions, from your physical being. So if we were to, when we look at integral education, we have to keep these meanings, these connotation in mind. Otherwise, there is no difference between progressive education and integral education. And I would like to make that difference here. So I would like to first share, you can still see my screen now?
Yes,
Yeah?
Anuradha. Yes.
I've come out of the slideshow mode because if I'm in the slideshow mode, I can't see you. And for me, it's important to see you. So I've come out of that. So I will just go like slide by slide. Sri Aurobindo at Baroda. I don't know how many of you know and have seen this picture. Sri Aurobindo, here he is, the gentleman in his Western clothes, but with the Indian touch on top. So when he returned from England in 1893, the same year when Swami Vivekanand went to America, interestingly, he joined the Gaikwar of Baroda service, and he was there till about 1904, 1905. And he initially joined as the secretary of the Maharaja, but the Maharaja then gave him also the additional duty of teaching at the college at Baroda, and then also he was its vice principal. So this is a photo of Sri Aurobindo with his students of the French class. Students looked very different those days than now. So when I thought of Sri Aurobindo as a teacher, these were some of the things which came to my mind. When one looks at Sri Aurobindo, who Sri Aurobindo is, and what his method was, these words came to my mind: impersonal, receptive, silent mind, a silent and powerful influence. There is a great emphasis on the freedom of the individual and on serving an ideal greater than oneself. Unfortunately, there are not too many anecdotes from Sri Aurobindo's teaching life because that was, very much in the past. Of course, there are many more anecdotes from him, not in the conventional sense a teacher, but uh, how he guided the sadhaks, how he unfolded the potential, the soul within them. Although for today's session, I have not really taken that up, but if we have time later, maybe we can look into that as well. I have drawn on certain statements from his students of that time, 1893, the late 19th century, whatever has been recorded. That is what I would like to share with you. This is what Sri Aurobindo said about himself as a teacher. Manmohan, that was his brother, elder brother. So he's in a conversation, Sri Aurobindo is saying that his elder brother was very conscientious, very painstaking. But he says, I wasn't like that. I never used to look at the notes. And sometimes my explanations also did not agree with the note. Now, because Sri Aurobindo had studied in England, he found it very surprising that the students would mug up and take down every word of the teacher and mug it up. I think that till quite recently, and even today in many schools, majority of schools, that is still happening after over 100 years, 125 years. So he says such a thing would have never happened in England. See, 125 years ago. So in education, we have to give it to England and other nations which are way beyond in the outer structure and the methodology than we are. We can take credit for the soul of education, but only if we really manifest it. So he says such a thing would have never happened. And he recounts that when once he was giving a lecture, and what he was saying was not in agreement with the notes. So the students said, that, but what you are saying is, not what is there in the notes. And Sri Aurobindo said, oh, I have not read the notes. In any case, they're all rubbish. So he says, I could never go into minute details. I read and left my mind to do what it could. Left my mind to do what it could. Now, if you read about Sri Aurobindo's spiritual experiences of that time and around that time, you would know that I forget the year, but it was very soon after his maybe late 19th century, or yeah, I truly forget the year, so let me not hazard. But when he had this very powerful experience of nirvana, of silent mind, he went to somebody called Vishnu Bhaskar Lele in Baroda, and because he had got interested in yoga, when Sri Aurobindo returned from England, he had no thought of that he will one day do yoga. Means not hot yoga exercises and all, but he will be on a spiritual path. And but various circumstances got him interested, and he was looking for somebody to teach him, how to go about it. He was stuck at a particular point, and somebody suggested Vishnu Bhaskar Lele to him. And Lele took him to a room in a building in Baroda, in a top room, and asked him to empty his mind, to watch thoughts coming to him, and before they entered his mind, to stop them from coming in, to reject them. And Sri Aurobindo just took it at its face value and just did it. If I imagine myself doing it, first of all, I don't understand the concept. I cannot see thoughts. And how to stop them, I don't know. So, but okay, so Sri Aurobindo did it. And he says in 3 days, his mind was complete blank. Now, if his mind was blank, how did he continue to do his work, teach, and then became the most dangerous man for the British, leading the political struggle of India? And then how could he write 7, 8 books simultaneously when he came to Pondicherry and wrote Life Divine and Synthesis of Yoga and Foundations of Indian Culture and Social and Political Thought, essays on the Gita, everything simultaneously. Every month he wrote a chapter of each of these books, which are very diverse from each other. And Sri Aurobindo says that, and also gave political speeches when he was in Calcutta and all. So he asked Lele, but I have to give a speech, and what will I do? So he said, do nothing, just be silent and invoke, and the words will come to you. And Sri Aurobindo says that's what he did. There were hundreds of people gathered to listen to him. He didn't prepare, he didn't do anything, and he just did that, and the words came. And he said, since that day, I have never thought, thought has not occurred in his mind. It is through a silent mind that he has been functioning. So he says, I read and left my mind to do what it could. This doesn't mean cogitating about it. It means just being open, receptive, silent, and letting the words flow. He says, that's why I could never become a scholar. Some people would disagree, but that's how. He never looked at himself as a philosopher or a scholar. Now, this is something from R.N. Patkar, who was a student of Sri Aurobindo in the 19th century, late 19th century. So he, speaking of his method of teaching, he says, so in the beginning, Sri Aurobindo would give a series of introductory lectures in order to initiate the student into the subject matter of the text. So he will just stand. We will see it further, and I've read it elsewhere also, that Sri Aurobindo would just stand, not look at the students. So much about individual contact and creating a personal rapport with each student. Nothing of that. He would just gaze into the infinity and words would come to him and he could speak like that for hours. And just extempore, he would give the lecture. So he would give series of introductory lectures to initiate the student into the subject matter, and then after that he would read the text, stopping where necessary to explain the meaning of difficult words and sentences, and then ended up by giving general lectures bearing on the various aspects of the subject matter of the text. So at that time there was no project method and discovery method and all those methods that we have today. So of course the question arises, if you're looking at Sri Aurobindo, and if we were to say, oh, Sri Aurobindo did this, like me also, Minoti, you're going to have a problem. Everybody is going to go back to lecture mode. Gaze into the infinite and lecture. So what do you say to that?
I have no problem if they gaze into the infinite in the real sense, Anuradha.
Yeah.
That would be so welcome.
Yeah. So we can imitate, we can be inspired and imitate, but we have to also reach that poise to be able to do justice to it. And that is something again and again Sri Aurobindo and Mother emphasize in their conversations and all, that everybody has to find their own method. What is true to you, who you are, you have to find that own method. So don't be bound by lectures, don't be bound by discovery method, don't be bound by project method. What is most important is that it is true to you and you can use that method and create something unique, something magical in the classroom and evoke the inner consciousness of the children, and first of all, your own, to be able to do that. And then R.N. Patkar says that more than the college lectures, it was a treat to hear him on the platform. So sometimes they were debating society and debates were, And everybody used to come because they wanted to hear him. He had a reputation as a great speaker, great teacher. So that is what he says, that he was a speaker of a very high order, and everybody listened to him spellbound. Without any gesture or movements of the lips, he stood. So he would be absolutely still and stand there, and language flowed like a stream from his lips with natural ease and melody. It's so unfortunate we don't have his voice, no recording of his voice. He had a British accent because he was brought up in England. People, the sadhaks, the people who were there with him, they have told us a little bit about it, but it would have been such a treasure to have listened to him. Maybe one can if one aspires and meets him in one's dreams. So his language flowed like a stream from his lips with natural ease and melody that kept the audience spellbound. So he says, even it's more than 50 years, but I still remember his figure and the ring of his melodious voice. So think of your teachers, some of you who are above 50, if you remember any teacher of yours, crystal clear who they were, how they spoke, the impact they had on you 50 years ago. That is that is a power of a teacher if touches the core of the student somehow. Please, if anybody wants to share at any moment or ask or say anything, feel free. And I think Seema can invite them if they raise their hand. Otherwise, I'll just continue. Is there anything at the moment?
No, not at the moment.
Just continue.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, this is an advice he gave to R.N. Patkar. R.N. Patkar was trying to develop his English, and he was reading some books, and especially Macaulay, Lord Macaulay, who did the maximum harm to Indian education. Well, not exactly. Actually, I'm wrong in saying that because he did a great service to the British, and it is our foolishness that we continued that model. But he was very true to his aim. The fault lies with us. So he said, this is what I'm studying, and should I continue and all that? And Sri Aurobindo just smiled and told him, do not be anybody's slave, but be your own master. So by reading any other author, you will only be their faint echo. You will be a copy which will never be as good as the original. Therefore, although you should read good authors carefully, but you should think for yourself and form your own judgment. It is likely that you may differ from the views of the writer. You should think for yourself and cultivate a habit of writing, and in this way, you will be the master of your own style. Now, this is again another note you will see again and again in Sri Aurobindo's conversations and letters with his disciples later on also, where he would always encourage people to question him. He would always say, do not accept something just because I am saying it. See, this was a context of a spiritual guru. It's not the same uh, with the teacher most often. But still, for young children, especially those of you who teach young children, you know that children kind of take you as demigods. And and there is a phase when they put you even higher than their parents. And it's a big, huge responsibility for us as teachers that is happening. And unfortunately, I have seen, not just with other teachers, but these strands are in all of us. I've seen with myself also, how easy it is to misuse that trust, to misuse that power. And although this is a little aside, but it comes to me an anecdote from Swami Vivekanand, where once he was giving a lecture, he was a very, very powerful orator. And people used to just listen to him spellbound and with a powerful voice and very clarity of speech, he would say. So he was giving a lecture in Calcutta, and the hall was absolutely full of people. And suddenly he stopped And he ran out of the auditorium. And people were absolutely aghast what happened to him. And then when he was asked later, he said, I could just feel the power that I could do anything with them. And it was really frightening, to have that power, that they were just like putty in my hands, and I didn't want that. Now, that is again another great, great sign of a facilitator or a teacher, that to know what your power can do and how much you should use it and how much you should actually give it up. So Sri Aurobindo would always encourage people to question him, to accept concepts and what he has written, not blindly just because Sri Aurobindo has said it or the mother has said it. And that is a trap we often fall into. And that is what creates fanaticism. But to question it, to understand it. And then, after understanding, if we are able to adapt it to the extent it is in harmony with how ready we are, where we are in our own journey, what makes sense to us. And I would say it's the same for everything. Even, like these days, environment is such a big concern. With Sanjay sitting here, I'm venturing to say that we have had many discussions at the Gnostic Center about that. And even in that movement, there are times when one feels, yeah, let me stop using this, using that, this thing. But then that doesn't last for many days. And because your rest of your nature is not ready to be true to that asceticism, which is needed actually today if we have to do something for the environment. So one has to find a way where one has the ideal and one knows that this is what I should be doing, and yet acknowledge this is where I am and how do I progress step by step towards that. So this is something very important, even from what we are dialoguing now, we are sharing. It is just to present some aspects and then whatever appeals to you, but question it, see, can you really apply it in your classroom? What makes sense to you? And how, if something inspires you, interests you, how can you adapt it to who you are? Now, this is later on when there was Bengal partition, 1904, 1905, Lord Curzon partitioned Bengal. That is the time Sri Aurobindo decided. He was involved in the political movement from Baroda also, but he could not be openly involved because he was in the government service. He was working for the Maharaja. But in 1904-05, he decided to come out openly. And he gave up his job in Baroda and moved to Calcutta. He was made the principal of a newly started college, National College. Is it known as Presidency College today, I think? I'm not sure. Calcutta, I'm not sure about this. This was started at that time as National College of Calcutta. And there was a speech he gave to the students there, and I've taken this piece from there. Of course, the context that time was that India was going through this struggle for independence, and there were lots of cries of Bande Matram, and there was a lot of national fervor. So the context is that, but I think the essence would apply even today. So he says that carry out the work, the mission for which this college was created. What we want here is not merely to give you a little information, not merely to open to you careers for earning a livelihood. So those two aims are there, information and careers, but to build up sons for the motherland to work and to suffer for her. That is why we started this college, and that is the work to which I want you to devote yourselves in future. And he goes on to say, I wish to see some of you becoming great, great not for your own sakes, not that you may satisfy. See, he's very practical. He says, I wish to see some of you. He doesn't say all of you. So he says, I wish to see some of you becoming great, great not for your own sakes, not that you may satisfy your own vanity, but great for her. Her here is India, to make her great, etc., etc. And then, if you study, study for her sake. Train yourselves body and mind and soul for her service. Learn, earn your living that you may live for, and all that. So do everything, go abroad, learn everything you do, but for her sake. So this thing of having a higher ideal and working towards that. It is not either or, that either I work for myself, for my career, for earning a livelihood, or I work for a higher ideal. It is that everything has to be put in a larger context, and that larger context in a still larger context. That is my progress. How much can I enlarge my vision, my horizon, and yet not give up on the smaller circles? Somebody asked him, this is a letter from later times, from because this is a sadhak in Pondicherry. Why do you never write to me about my problems unless I specifically ask? So Sri Aurobindo says, I never do that to anybody unless he gives me the occasion. A sadhak must become conscious and lay himself before the light, see and reject and change. It is not the right method for us to interfere and lecture and point out this and point out that. That is the schoolmaster method. It does not work in the spiritual change. The reason I included this passage was because I felt this is, for me, this points to, how important it is for the student, for the teacher, for the facilitator to know what is the student ready for? What is the student really asking? And to be there and yet not to, and yet to be kind of withdrawn. And I'm sure most of you who are parents, especially with today's generation, would understand that very well. Today, our children are no longer Indians. They are not even Westerners. They are somewhere in between. So at least I face this with my nieces and nephews, that, there is this, don't judge us, don't ask us. Even if they share their problems, you have to only listen. If you start advising, they close down. You have to just be a very silent, receptive sound, not even sounding board. Even sounding board is gone now. It is just you have to listen. And if they ask you, then you give your two penny bit. So this is something I feel is so, so relevant, not to interfere and yet be there. And the moment there is an opening, then to come in. So I bring back these points: impersonal, receptive, silent mind, silent and powerful influence, freedom of the individual, and serving an ideal greater than oneself. So before we go on to the mother, it would be nice if there is some sharing, reflection, anything.
If we have any reflection, question, or thoughts, we can type it in the chat box or we can raise our hand on screen.
So, as regards the mother, there are many, many stories about her because, as I said in the beginning, she was the executive power. So, in 1926, Sri Aurobindo withdrew from direct contact with the disciples and started focusing on a particular aspect of his inner work and the spiritual evolution of humanity. And he gave the charge to the mother, and that's how the ashram started. And in 1940s, when with the starting of the World War II, 1939, when the Second World War started, a lot of devotees, etc., they were scared because that there will be bombardment, their children will not be safe in the different parts of the country, and they asked permission to come to the ashram. Before that, families were not allowed in the ashram. It was a really tapobhumi. There was great intensity of tapasya. But mother being the mother, when this request was put to her, she of course allowed them to come, and that is how children came. Now, once the children came in the early 1940s, Taradi being one of them, of the early, I think all of you know Taradi, who runs the Delhi ashram. So once the children came, then the mother said, they cannot be left without just like that. So a school has to start. And that is how the ashram school started. And the first few years, mother herself was one of the teachers. So it was Taradi's privilege to be educated by the mother and our privilege to know Taradi and to have chats with her. So we go to the mother. This is, you see, here's the mother taking a class, and you see this girl sitting here. Can you see? In shorts on the floor next to the mother. That is Taradi when she was in the ashram. You can read these yourself. These are the points I felt to highlight. The mother was kind of working 24 hours, 24/7. And so I don't think there is anything one can say that she was not teaching through. Whatever it was, the teaching was going on. There is a little anecdote which I came across. It's not about teaching, but it says something. One day, mother commented, she was walking in her room and she suddenly said something. She said, ah, or something. And somebody who was there asked, what happened, mother? And she said, for days, I've been trying to make this carpet conscious. When I walk on it, I've been trying to make the carpet conscious. And today I felt a response. Now, I'm just flabbergasted. What was she doing? So to speak of her as a teacher is absolutely beyond me, actually. I don't know what she was doing. We can only look at some anecdotes but know that something tremendous was happening at each moment. This is a quotation by the mother. The mother gave this advice to the teachers of the school, that the teacher also has to progress. We as teachers, the school is not just for the progress of the students, but for the teacher. And then she says, each one should have the freedom to develop freely. So it's not only the children who should have freedom. In the ancient system, ancient meaning not Vedic, but the conventional system, teacher has maximum freedom. Now in the progressive, we try to give children the maximum freedom. But mother says each one should have the freedom to develop freely. Because and she then this thing about what I said earlier, everybody has to find their own method. And she says, and she is very sympathetic to us. She says, otherwise it's as boring for the teacher as for the student. Somewhere else she has said that if you have, she made a comment, teachers are donkeys. And obviously everybody was, shocked. What is she saying? She says, yeah, if you keep teaching the same thing in the same way every year, then for sure you will become a donkey. So you have to every year reinvent, because you have to progress. And from that poise, you have to then approach what you are teaching and how you are teaching it.
And Radhati, there's a hand raise that we see.
Please. Shall I stop sharing the screen?
Shruti Didi, would you want to say something?
Yes, sir. Good evening, everyone. And Anuradha Didi, I've attended your other workshops also with Gnostic Center. And there is one thing that is haunting me, the anecdote that you shared just now about Swami Vivekanand. And, it happens with us as a facilitator. And very recently, when we were doing our induction sessions also with the teachers, when there is no question, you are facilitating and you have prepared so well, and you have had experience of facilitating a concept. And as a history teacher also, जब मैं school में class में पढ़ा रही हूँ, and when there is no question, वो feeling बहुत haunt करती है, because आपको पता है शायद आप ठीक कर रहे हो, but there is no response. And as Vivekanand ji rightly said कि उस समय the listener is totally into you, and then there is a fear inside you, कुछ गलत तो नहीं हो जाएगा. So how to overcome that? Because you know sometimes जब क्वेश्चन नहीं आता तो ये लगता है कि जो आप पढ़ा रहे हो या जो आप समझा रहे हो या जो आप बात कर रहे हो वो सही भी है, और अगर वो गलत है तो क्या ये लोग गलत ले लेंगे? You know, एक कंफ्यूजन होता है उस समय. So मेरा भी उस समय मन करता है कि leave the situation and move out.
If I'm hearing you correctly, I hear two questions actually. One is related to when you give the example of Swami Vivekanand, um, that is related to the power he had over their consciousness. And like you yourself said, they are completely into you, meaning they are totally absorbed by what you are saying. That is a different kind of power. Then the fear that is there is not about what you're saying is right or what you're doing is right. There is no self-doubt or second guessing. There is only a tremendous responsibility and kind of respect for the student or the listener for their own freedom. A great, I would say, love and compassion that they should be original thinkers. They should, even if they are giving up their freedom to you, but you feel no. Swami Vivekananda has said that every person should have their own religion. Now, what a tremendous statement to make. Every person should have their own religion. What kind of freedom that would be? And that we, each one accepts the other with that religion while following my own religion. So that is a different kind of a context. The context where people are not asking questions, like especially the online context where I can't even see you, I can't even know from your body language whether you are asleep or are with me or not. There, at least for me, I will not try and give advice to you. I can only talk about myself, and I have experienced this, what you are talking about. But whenever I have experienced this, this has been because I am centered in my ego. And I'm centered in, am I making a good impression or not? And am I being a good teacher or not? And now I see this shift happening. I won't say I've come fully there, but this shift happening where that is not important. What is important is if I've taken on something, first of all, it should be interesting to me. If I'm doing this session, I cannot do it if it is boring for me. And it should be something meaningful, and I should also learn while doing this session. So if that is happening, my own aim of progress is getting met. And if I can add to that, and that is my aspiration, if I can be, while facilitating, be in touch, like I said, that silent poise and that executive power. Now that silent poise I might feel within myself, or for me, it might be Sri Aurobindo or Mother, feeling their power, their energy, that vibration pulsating through me. Whatever is my experience, but something which connects me to something deeper, my own deeper self. And then from there, if I can speak and communicate, whether even one person listens and understands, it is of no consequence to me. And I'm not going to judge myself from that. So that is the thing. Now, ideally, if one can come to a situation where one can do this, and like Sri Aurobindo and Vivekanand, and yet the audience is spellbound, then there is something one is doing right. But I don't think for Swami Vivekananda or for Sri Aurobindo, it mattered, you know. I don't know, I don't even think it was in their, this is my understanding, of course, that they would think, today, how many will listen to me? Will I be able to make an impression? Will I impact them? There was a truth that was seen, and there was a need to communicate that truth, and that is what happened. And then let the truth itself do its work. So there is a kind of an offering to a higher force to do whatever is right. So when one is making this journey from being self-centered in the ego to, and yet there is this aspiration to go beyond, there will be many moments, Shruti, when you will be either here or there, and these doubts will come. The only thing is to keep offering them to the deepest, the most beautiful part of you, and to try and, try and connect to whatever your own largest, deepest aim is in why you became a teacher or why you teach, why you facilitate, and try and connect to that.
Thank you. Thank you, Didi.
Now, this is a story about the mother. One day she was telling a story to the children, and suddenly a very big, both the lizards, there were two big lizards fighting, chipkali, two big fat lizards, and they both of them fell on her back. She flinched for a second and then sat straight calmly while Amioda, somebody in the ashram, they tried to remove it from her back. It must have taken 15 seconds before he succeeded, but the mother remained unruffled and immobile. The children, of course, got agitated, running here, there. Finally, when the lizards were taken care of and the children settled down, the mother was all this time sitting there calm and composed. Then the mother asked them why they were afraid of these tiny creatures who would do no harm to them. And not only that, then she explained at length to them why it was necessary to have equanimity and self control in all circumstances. Now, this is an aspect that you will again see again and again of the mother in her conversations. She used to have a lot of conversations. She has not written so much. Aurobindo wrote copiously. Uh, what we see as mothers' collected works are actually, most of them are her conversations, classes, conversations with sadhaks, with children, with teachers, etc., etc. And if you go through them, you will see that she gave a lot of importance to clarity of mind. When somebody asks her a question, she would not answer it till the question was put in the right way. She would keep encouraging the person to, I didn't understand. And the person would go, no, and person will think, mother is not understanding. What's wrong with her? She cannot understand, and I'm speaking so clearly. And finally, till the person understood that they were not framing the question precisely. So, because many a times when we ask something, we are wanting to ask something else, but we are saying something else. So, till that harmony happened between these outer and inner, mother would not respond to the question. And she would always take care to explain, to explain, to explain again and again, again and again, um, rather than just instruct. And the same thing is seen with the mother also. If somebody would say to her, Mother, I'm going to Chennai, she would say, okay. But if somebody would say, Mother, I want to go to Chennai, should I go? Then she would say, no, my child, I don't think it is the right thing for you to do. But by herself, she would not say, except in some rare cases where the person had given complete responsibility internally to the mother for their care, and then she would. So, this relationship is something very, very precious. Same way, she would make them meditate, but also explain to children the importance of meditation. Doing nothing as a ritual, but going deeper. Now, this is again, there are so many stories about how she would emphasize on perfection. So this is from Taradi. So Taradi was given a sheet to be typed out, and she made some minor mistakes. So mother returned it to her and asked her to retype it. When Taradi retyped it, she still made some mistakes, but she was conscious of them and she rubbed them off and typed over them correctly. But even this was not acceptable. And she made her retype it without any mistake. So till Taradi had got it perfect, not so first step was becoming conscious, self-checking. Second was becoming conscious and perfect so that there was no mistake at all. I've heard of anecdotes where somebody used to work in the postal department and she had to put a stamp on the envelope and the stamp was a little crooked. And the mother made her take off the stamp and put it again 20 times till she got the stamp absolutely perfect. Now, we can call it OCD. We can say, what is happening here? You know, this person, what is the big deal? But for mother, nothing was small, nothing was unimportant. It was the same movement of consciousness which had to reflect in each and every action. So, when we are in the classroom, how the children put their chairs, how they arrange their notebooks, how each and every gesture becomes an occasion for teaching and learning, not just the lesson, all the time we spend with them. The same thing is here. This is again from Taradi. So there was a program in the playground. Everybody got up, mother got up, other people got up. Now in the playground, mother would sit on a chair and other people would sit on the mats. There is sand in the playground. So they would sit on the mats. And everybody just left their mats like that and went off, you know, because they were more keen to go after the mother to chat with her and to say bye to her, etc., etc. But Taradi stayed back and without thinking much, she started to roll the mats and put them back where they belong. Mother was in front and she was talking to somebody and she must have observed Taradi's actions. So when Taradi joined the queue of others who were waiting, sorry, I went ahead, who were waiting for the mother, as the mother walked towards the gate, she suddenly stopped in front of me and gave me the most tender and divine hug. She praised me for my conscious dedication to duty and said, this is what she expected from an ideal captain. This small gesture has remained with me, and when things are not taken care of, then she. Now you see, mother could have also said to others, hello, what are you doing? Why haven't you put your mats back? She didn't say anything. She was walking off. But she had noticed that everybody had done this. But she didn't punish them or say anything. But one person who did it right, she praised and hugged her, and like a reward or whatever. And that is what. So teaching through rewards, through acknowledgement, through praise, rather than through comparison or through. But let me say also, competitions were held in the ashram. Mother herself used to hold the tape or measure the distance of long jumps, etc., etc. She encouraged competitions. But again, one has to look in the context of the atmosphere was not competitive, of putting the other down. The atmosphere was of progressing and of doing one's best when mother is watching me. Can I bring out the best in me? And how much progress I've made from last year to this year. I know in Shikshantar also that you follow the same philosophy of self-competition rather than competing with others. So it's not just giving up all competitions, but doing it in another spirit. And then she would take up a lot of topics, you know, during the classes. She would suddenly take up some other topic completely different to what the subject was and bring in or play a game or something like that. Bring in something else. I'm rushing through a little because I see I have only 3 minutes left. So I'm going to rush a little. And stories, theater, music, everything was a means. She used to tell lots of stories and from different religions, from different cultures, to widen the children's mind, to widen their consciousness. There is one book, Tales of All Times, which I would recommend to all of you to read. And it's a lovely reading because it is a book of stories told by the mother, Tales of All Times. Just a couple of points more, yeah. And she would explain the deeper meaning. Now, before I end, I want to play a little small game because mother used to play these spiritual games. She would give a few random words to the people It could be children, it could be sadhaks, and say, make a sentence. So here I've got 3 words, which are very easy actually for you, but freedom, discipline, progress. So make a sentence, you can type it into the chat box, whatever comes to you. Don't think too much about it, just whatever comes. KBC style, I should have a timer.
I think the team, you can start putting it in chat. We could read the sentences from there.
I mean, you can use other words, of course, but these 3 words. All the 3 words together you have to use. Freedom isn't free, but you have to use all 3 words together in a sentence, along with other words that you introduce. So, for example, just to start you off, I've written a sentence. Progress is when there is discipline and freedom, Deepa says. Progress arises from the freedom to apply discipline to a task. I seek the freedom to self-discipline to make progress. With freedom comes self-discipline and eventually progress. I'm free to make progress towards my own freedom with help of my discipline. Freedom itself is a discipline and it gradually leads to progress. So wonderful. You see how many, just with 3 words, how many different ideas can come. And maybe you could have a whole webinar on just these 3 words and everybody's sentences. And I'm sure many more will come with 200 participants or so. The freedom to do or let go is a process of progressing from unmindfulness to self-discipline. Wonderful. So you see, mother would just break the class in between and suddenly give some words or ask questions. Like once she asked to her the sadhaks, what is yoga? Explain in a sentence, what is yoga? And different people said different things, trying to make it, very, trying to impress the mother. These were but senior sadhaks. And there was one person, I don't know if you've heard his name, Pavitra, who's written this book, Education and the Aim of Human Life, French gentleman. And he just simply said, to return home. To return home. Because that's where we have come from, the divine. And to the process of going back to the divine is yoga. So to return home. Isn't that lovely? So I'm sorry I have to stop here because of the time. I'm really enjoying reading these sentences that you're putting in. I will share the PowerPoint with Seema so that anybody is interested, they can go through it on their own. As a reference, they can keep it with themselves. I want to end with this advice, what she said to the teachers, the mother. She said, the children must be educated in an atmosphere of love and gentleness. No violence, never. No scolding, never. Always a gentle kindness, and the teacher must be the living example of the virtues the child must acquire. The children must be happy to go to school, happy to learn, and the teacher must be their best friend who gives them the example of the qualities they must acquire. And all that depends exclusively on the teacher, what he does or she does, and how he or she behaves. So, complete freedom, a lot of love, happiness, living example, no violence ever. And these are the two books I would recommend. On Education, which is volume 12 of the collected works of the mother. It is a beautiful book because there is a compilation of mother's articles, plus her conversations with teachers, her work in the classes with the students, the plays she wrote. Lots of things are there. And even if you just do pick up this one book and you read it and read it and read it, you will understand integral education. And then this Tales of All Times, which I said. So that's it from my side.
Thank you, Anuradha Didi.
Welcome.
Didis and Bhaiyas, if we have any question, reflection, or any thought, we can type it in the chat box or we can raise our hand on screen.
So, Anuradha Didi, you were talking about, sharing about mother's love for perfection. So now this question has been on my mind, and I sometimes wonder, like, I like to be a perfectionist in a lot of ways myself, but at the same time, as a teacher or a facilitator, over a period of time, I've learned how to um, uh, appreciate the imperfection. And I think it becomes really important for us to make children appreciate themselves, for which they really have to learn how to appreciate imperfection. And somewhere there's this conflict that arises. How much perfection do we strive for? Um, it needs to be age related, and at the same time, the beauty of imperfection is itself um so individual. uh, that is what separates one child from another, one person from another, and one work from another. So how do we this remains a thing for me to decide, whether to go pursue perfection. Should we always present that example or that ideal to children, or should we also inculcate in them that appreciation of imperfection?
So I'm address it in a short time. The first question to ask oneself is how do I define perfection? Do I have a definition of perfection in my mind? That is very important because perfection is nothing fixed. It is always evolving. There is nothing like, okay, when you have a physical distance to run or a physical thing, then it is fine that I have reached here and I have completed it and it's finished. We are talking of a psychological attitude, a quality. Then it is a relative term and it is ever evolving. So today, what I consider perfection, tomorrow my own standard would change as I evolve. And that freedom has to be there. Perfection doesn't mean that my standard I impose on you, that this is perfect and you have to reach here. So we could replace it with the word excellence, maybe, that I try or self exceeding, that I try to exceed myself. I ask myself, how have we done the best I'm capable of today? And that, of course, will change. But that emphasis on giving one's best, not being unconscious, not being careless, not being lazy. The anecdote I told you, do you think it was impossible for Taradi to type out without any mistake? Why did that mistake happen? Was it due to lack of capability or lack of attention? Same way, postage stand not being put straight, lack of capability or lack of eye for detail, lack of judgment, lack of attention, carelessness, hurry. There could be various things. So there is no fixed answer for this. It is mainly what am I trying to inculcate? And the first thing, of course, is that am I setting that example myself? Right? So here we are talking of the mother as the teacher, and she was setting that example. I cannot be imperfect in the sense of not striving for the best that I'm capable of and want the children to do that. That is not going to work. That is tyranny. So when you say love of imperfection, maybe it can be put in a different way. It can be a wideness of consciousness, a sympathy. You know, when like parents do, or like people who are mentors and all, because they have done the same journey and they know, like if I have experienced a stomach ache and today you are experiencing it, I can sympathize with you. I can say, hold on, you know, you will reach. I don't have to judge you and put you down because you are feeling like that. So if I am on the journey of perfection and there is somebody else who's doing things shoddily, the first thing is of understanding why it is happening. And then whatever inputs I give through, not through judgment, not through imposition, but through encouragement, and where I know that the person is capable of more. And where I know they're not capable, then how do, as a facilitator, how do I enhance that capability? So there cannot be a fixed answer for all situations. These are the basic principles I would go by.
Thank you, Anuradha.